Hello, and welcome to today's PSU Transportation Seminar. My name is Jason, and I will be introducing and moderating today's seminar. Thank you. Our Friday transportation seminars have been a tradition since the year 2000. These seminars are usually held live on Portland State University's urban campus, located on the ancestral homelands of the Multnomah, Cathlamet, Clackamas, Tumwater, and Watlala bands of the Chinook, the Tualatin, Kalapuya, and many other indigenous nations of the Columbia River. It is important to acknowledge that we are here because of the sacrifices forced on the indigenous ancestors of this place and remember these communities and to honor their legacy, lives, and descendants. Today, we are pleased to have Ryan Hashagen, so sorry if I butchered it, presenting on Let Knowledge Serve the City, exclamation point, a decade of Better Block PSU projects. Ryan is the director of Better Block PDX and founder of Icicle Tricycles. That's a great name. A cargo bike manufacturing business based in Old Town Portland, Oregon, as well as Victoria, British Columbia. Ryan has a strong passion for utilizing cargo bikes to inject interaction and commerce into our shared right-of-ways and can often be seen rolling and rowing around on a variety of vehicles and vessels. Here's a preview of some upcoming seminars, including a special in-person only transportation seminar next Wednesday, November 6th from 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. in room 315 of the engineering building. And for those of you who are students at PSU, here are some upcoming events from the Students in Transportation Planning and Engineering Student Group, also known as STEP. In particular, Ryan will be presenting for STEP November 19th. So if you're a student at PSU, come see that. There's also potential for a walk around. As an overview of today's seminar, you can expect our speaker to present for about 45 minutes, followed by a Q&A session. We will be receiving questions through the Q&A feature on your Zoom control panel, and we'll ask them at the end of the presentation. If we run out of time for all of your questions, we will give our speaker the opportunity to email written responses for any questions left unanswered. We have enabled closed captioning, but you must click on the CC feature to view them. We will be recording today's webinar. It will be available on our website later today, along with the presentation slides. If you are tracking professional development hours, this webinar is eligible for 1 hour of continuing education credit. With that, I will hand it over to Ryan. Ryan? There you are.
Great, thank you.
You got it.
Okay, good day. Nice to see a bunch of familiar faces and excited to share this presentation with you guys. A lot of people in this room and in the community have been key contributors to this pathway being a success. So I'm excited to share with you some of the projects. I'm going to first give you just a little brief introduction to myself and how I got involved in doing activism. I was really into being a bicycle advocate back in the day, and I found some of the activism to be confrontational and not always the most engaging. It was kind of a us versus them mentality. And I found that on a tricycle, the mentality would change. People would see you pedaling a trike around and go, instead of being upset that there was an impediment to traffic, they go, oh, look how cute that is. And it also was a way where you could have engagement and interaction in our right-of-ways, a way to humanize our streets and to make our public spaces a space that was not just motor vehicles rushing through. And so I found tricycles to be this kind of like magical little tool of using capitalism to create human interaction. And that's why I've been so passionate about tricycles. We've done some great activism like free ice cream for bike lane builders here in Portland. We also build trikes for folks all over the world. I was just sharing this in Canada. This is a trike we built for Greenpeace in Montreal. This is a trilingual trike in Timmins, Ontario that's in Ojibwe, French, and English. And this is one for the Saskatoon Immigrant Resource Center that they share with families, immigrants, and the resources. This one's here locally, Street Books. They do a houseless library here for this on the street. But I'm not here to share about my business and capitalism. I'm here to share about Better Block. So, there's a lot of words there. So Essentially, what I'm going to share here is that we take community projects that are projects inspired by the community, and we have urban planning students study the projects, and then civil engineering capstone students produce plans to test out the concepts in real life and to prototype these ideas on the streets. The first one that we did was Parking Day. This was over a decade ago. Started with Stark, it's now Harvey Milk, and converted it for one day into a pop-up plaza, pop-up space with activities in the street. That was a success. Figured, okay, well, let's do it again. Popcorn Plaza was the next one. This is down on Clinton Street, a 1920s streetcar neighborhood with a historical theater. You guys may know this. We had a traffic control plan that was produced by Better Block. Ben Shaney, one of our co-founders of Better Block, is here that produced the plan. But the idea was to create a plaza space in the old, what I believe might be streetcar turning radii. Went really well. We had people come in the rain and interact. Folks like Melissa, another one of our co-founders here, who's now in Montreal. Have signage and bands and families enjoying the space. That's where I got involved, was on 3rd Avenue. Our business is located in Old Town. And so for a long time, we've been looking in Old Town, how do we increase pedestrian connectivity? How do we enhance foot traffic and make it a safer neighborhood? As many of you know, Old Town has a mix of people in the neighborhood. We've been inspired by what was happening in Vancouver. You know, prior to the 2010 Olympics, they had created a dedicated cycle track network throughout the downtown core. Portland was still lacking it at the time. This was the kind of the connectivity at the moment. We really only had the buffered bike lanes on Harvey Milk and Oak, and then the Esplanade. And so here was 3rd Avenue at the time. This was one of the only crosswalks in the neighborhood. The neighborhood had been asking for crosswalks for 15 years on 2nd Avenue, 3rd Avenue, 4th Avenue. Old Town is a neighborhood that by day, social services, people are getting around by foot to get to the services and get their needs met. By night, this intersection we found out using Portland Business Alliance crosswalk data and doing some of our own line counts, found out this is one of the busiest pedestrian intersections in the city at nighttime, during the nightlife scene. Now, the folks that are doing the surveying and the city officials were not often down there at 11 o'clock at night, seeing that there was, 5,000 crossings occurring at Cooch and 3rd. We wanted to have more crosswalks in the neighborhood. The Business Association asked the city for the lead traffic engineer, Rob Birchfield, for more crosswalks. And Rob said, well, we can't. It's a triple threat. Due to NCHRP 562, it's the formula for crosswalks. You can't have one there with the speeds and the multiple lanes, and 3 lanes is just, it's too much. And one of the business owners said, well, what if we just make it 2 lanes? And proposed this idea. This is what the bar owner of Dixie came up with. I saw that and said, hey, can I take a photo of that? Sure. Shared it with Bike Portland. You're gonna see a lot of Bike Portland headlines in here. Bike Portland's an amazing resource for our community, and really documented a lot of this. Well, other people saw that headline, including Better Block. And they said, hey, well, what if we tried what we just did on Clinton Street? What if we just tried Popcorn Plaza on 3rd Avenue? What if we tested out this concept temporarily? We'd asked the lead engineer of the city, said, can we try this concept of 2 lanes, putting in crosswalks, putting in a buffered bike lane? And he said, yeah, but there's, we don't really have a funding mechanism. We don't have a way to do this. There's a federal grant that's coming in 6 years. You could apply for that and maybe you'll get selected. We'll see. But Better Block stepped in and said, well, what if we just do a community use permit? What if we just do a block party for a weekend, test out the concept, be able to evaluate it in real time? And the city said, yeah, okay. You guys have insurance? We go, yeah, we got insurance. And so we proceeded. We made a traffic control plan. We worked with the neighborhood business owner. So this is Howard Winter. He's the chair of the Old Town Community Association at the time. He was excited about the project, but got really excited when the press came to him and started asking him questions about what a great idea it was. And it was a really great opportunity to champion the local businesses and have them get on board and have it really be their idea and own the project. So here we are. We tested out. Here's a traffic control plan or a rendering of the different activation spaces. And here's Boris and Melissa, some of our other co-founders, and making stencils above Dixie in Old Town, above the bar scene. This is what it looked like before. The extent of our project was from Everett Street all the way to Ash Street. It's kind of surprising to look at this now. Really, no one knows why there's such a wide expanse there at Voodoo, expanse. And then here's what it was during the project. We tested it out. We brought these hay bales from Linton Feed and Seed down to Old Town. I didn't think the hay bales were going to work. Other folks said, yeah, let's try these hay bales. I didn't think people were going to sit on them. I thought it was going to be too prickly. One of our neighboring bar owners said, I don't want them anywhere near me. And I said, that's fine. We'll take them down to Voodoo. Next day, coming down the street, he waves me down. He says, hey, Ryan, can I have more of those hay bales? I'm like, yeah, what changed? He just points down to Voodoo. He just points to this crowd. He just says, I can just bring like a fraction of those people down to my business. I could open up for happy hour. Maybe I could open up for brunch. And it was nice too, because we were able to test this out in real time, adjust the concept. I mean, and to see that we had all these tourists here, and then we also had residents of the Union Gospel Mission and patrons of Blanchet House sitting and engaging next to each other in a way where neither behavior was necessarily highlighted. And that was a really instructive lesson for our neighborhood leaders, for them to come down and see, oh, look at what this space looks like with more people and more activation. So here we are, prototyping the concepts. We invited the Fire Bureau to come down and have their ladder truck come through the project. We had freight trucks come through there and document it. One of the things that was most fulfilling for me was the city engineers right here, it's hard to see, and the PSU students. These are PSU planning students. Catherine Doherty Chapman, Zeph Wagner, that are now PBOT staff. These are students that were down here excited about the project. Here's Rob Birchfield's right outside of the picture with his clipboard. He was down there studying the project day after day. You know, this is not something that the city at the time could implement themselves. So to have us implement it and then for them to have the opportunity to study it, we used to tell the mayor, Mayor Hales at the time, would say, look, we're your insurance policy. If things go well, you can take all the credit. If things go bad, you can just say, oh, it was those students and, you know, better Block volunteers. So it helps lessen the pressure on making decisions. And we had a lot of fun. You know, there's families testing out the protected bike lane we made. And, you know, this crosswalk right here became one of the busiest crosswalks in the city. And we also, through the iterative process, realized that, okay, our tar paper with duct tape on it was not the best way to do this. So we reconfigured it and adjusted it in real time. We got some amazing press coverage from this too. We had Coin and KGW and some of the TV stations that have not traditionally been excited about active transportation infrastructure come down and give glowing reports for come on down and see the fun down at Voodoo Donuts and at the Voodoo Plaza. We also made sure to build that political ownership. So here's Mayor Hales enjoying ice cream down on Better Third. Here is Commissioner Novick and Jay Isaacs with Portland Metro Chamber and one of the big developers in the city playing ping pong. Here's Boris, you know, providing a tour with Timur Ender, who's running for council right now in District 1, and Mayor Hale's staff. And here's a midnight bar summit where we had all the bar owners give the mayor and their staff and city councilors a tour of what is the nightlife scene? What is the entertainment district? Why is there a need for pedestrian connectivity in Old Town? These projects at the same time, they created that political ownership. These politicians are now involved. They've seen it, they've experienced it. They're also getting photographed in the press. They are these projects are becoming theirs as we do these policymaker tours. We had high school bands playing in the street. And then within, I want to say 3 months, this work order from PBOT got issued. So the neighborhood had been waiting 15 plus years for crosswalks. Here, the city's installing 16 crosswalks on 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Avenue. And that's a neighborhood that traditionally the city had said, oh, well, they're all crosswalks. There's just not marked crosswalks. Having marked crosswalks in Old Town was a huge victory and was something we were able to get done with the cities. I mean, the city implemented it within 3 months. Shortly thereafter, PBOT started building out a plaza at Voodoo Donuts. And you can see, again, this is an iterative approach where it starts out just marking space. Okay, now Bikey Town got implemented. Now we've got roses and murals being painted on the street, and it continues to be improved upon. I want to also credit the folks from the Car Free Cities Conference in 2007 that initially started with Ankeny Alley. That was an iterative approach that we built upon. I'm excited to see what's the next generation. As you'll hear, we have students right now studying the bridgeless Burnside concept and looking at what are we going to do during the Burnside Bridge closure. Is that going to be an expansion of Ankeny Alley to Saturday Market move westward? Those are concepts that the students are currently studying. Okay, so we're sitting down on the hay bales and we're going, this is fun. Like, what do we do next? And Timur Ender, one of our volunteers, as mentioned, running for council, said, well, Mayor Hales just mentioned building a bike trail from NATO to Astoria. Should we get started on that? Go, oh, okay, that seems like let's give it a shot. So this is context, just for people that aren't in Portland. Willamette River, this is the street we're talking about. So Better NATO, we go down and we document. This is what it looks like during Rose Festival. You can see there's no sidewalk here on NATO. There is people waiting in the bike lane. There is people walking, pushing strollers in the bike lane with 30, 35 mile an hour traffic right next to them. People biking in the street. And there's 700,000 people that come to the festivals over the course of summertime. So we reached out to Rose Festival. We reached out to Pride Fest, Brewers Fest, and surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, they immediately embraced the idea. And they said, yeah, please, let's convert a vehicle lane and have space for people to walk and bike and roll to our events. We started it out with the idea of just taking their loading lane that they use for truck load in and load out, and convert that to a multi-use path. So it was interesting. We'd have some bike advocates at times be frustrated that there'd be a truck loading in that space. Well, we're actually like, hey guys, there's the bikes are getting to use the load zone. It's not that the trucks are using your bike lane, but so again, that's an iterative approach. It was, let's think about the concept. So first off, here we are testing out the idea with cones. Bunch of volunteers. We worked together with Commissioner Novik's office. Here's Ben and Timur, and there's Gwen, and here's Commissioner Novik. We handed out these plaques to all the PBOT officials. You'll still sometimes see Dylan Rivera, the PIO for PBOT, or Hannah Schaefer, Director of Communications, in the background as they're being interviewed on the TV with these Better NATO circle plaques. Yeah, great idea to make sure that we share this credit with them, that we give them tokens of appreciation. As you may know, Harbor Drive used to be a freeway. So this was the first urban freeway removal in America. This right here is where Better NATO ended up being. So we built upon that long legacy of innovation and building off that legacy of Governor McCall and that history of conservation and history of embracing our public spaces to experiment with what maybe is a less radical approach than tearing out a freeway. We're just converting a lane to a space for people. We documented the social media on it. We worked with PBOT at this point to start making sure there was a coordinated social media effort and that we were documenting the success of this project. At this point, Gwen Shaw, who's here with us, comes into the picture. Gwen was a civil engineering capstone student at PSU. And we had asked the civil engineering capstone students to create a traffic control plan for Better NATO. I remember having a meeting with Mayor Hales and Commissioner Novick where they said, yeah, if Rose Festival's behind it, we're good with this. We'll give you a permit. And calling Gwen and saying, okay, Rose Festival starts next week. You're a senior in PSU, you know, you have a gazillion responsibilities. By the way, can you get us a traffic control plan in 3 days? And Gwen rose to the occasion and with her team and drew up a traffic control plan that ended up resulting in Better NATO. So here you see, we continued this effort. This went on for several years. It was an iterative approach where we would put it in for each festival, and then ultimately we put it in for each summer. And then ultimately we handed it off to the city. It became too much of a responsibility for us as volunteers to be maintaining it. Me pedaling my tricycle down the street, making sure cones weren't knocked over, or getting calls at 2 a.m. because there was a collision and we are the emergency contact. These were a responsibility for the city, but we wanted to help provide that oxygen in the room for the city planners and the staff at PBOT to try new ideas. And so it was really a partnership and a collaboration, but at a certain point, the training wheels came off and PBOT took over and we applauded that. You can see there's great staff. You know, I've mentioned Timor several times, Gabe Graff, you know, obviously Gwen helped make Better NATO possible. We did a series of policymaker tours, just like we did for 3rd Avenue. So here's Art Pierce and Leah Treat, the director of PBOT. She was a huge champion of this project that we're forever grateful for Director Treat's expertise. Here's Emily Geis, who had just co-founded Bike Loud and giving an interview with the press. All of this was important elements to building that support for this project. We'd also been looking at what was going on in Calgary. They had done a temporary pilot project of cycle tracks. And one of the key elements of this, I mean, there's 2 unique elements. One is that it was a temporary cycle track implementation versus a huge capital project where you tear up the streets for years. They went in and they tested out the concept using temporary materials and saying, we're going to have metrics for what is success. What does this mean for us? You know, if this is, what is our evaluation criteria and what are our metrics for whether we should make this a permanent feature of the city? And so we took inspiration from that, and so did PBOT. And PBOT created the Better NATO report in 2017. This report, we can't read all of it, but I'm trying to show the concept here of PBOT is now documenting and showing that, look, travel times are at the most, so a peak of 30 seconds in the rush hour delay, that there isn't, at times there's 40% of the rides are being done by active transportation on the route. So having these metrics, documenting it, putting it into an infographic that can be readable and shared with the press. This project had relatively unanimous support in the community, but there was some opposition. And so to be able to counter the opposition, and the opposition was typically anecdotal, and to be able to counter that anecdotal opposition with actual facts proved to be a very effective strategy. So again, I just gave this presentation in Kingston, Ontario, where we were presenting in front of the city council, and they said they want to see ribbon cuttings. City councilors like ribbon cuttings. Well, we had a lot of ribbon cuttings. Here's one with Rich Jarvis from PBOT and Commissioner Hardesty and Anne Campbell NATO, the granddaughter of Bill NATO, the famous Japanese-American business person that NATO Parkway is named after. Here's Gwen again. Here's the director of PBOT. More ribbon cuttings, more policymaker tours. By now, let's say, if you want to get something done, make sure you share credit. And so this was the idea. At each stage, we're trying to make sure that we're sharing credit with the business leaders, with the neighborhood leaders, with the city elected officials, and make it their project as much as it is ours. And it turned out to be an effective strategy. Because by 2019, say, it was a capital project. The city is now transformed over a mile of NATO Parkway into this beautiful green expanse that is one of the most utilized, bike lanes and active transportation routes in the city. So, and this was done with, I've mentioned our core volunteers. I've mentioned, the elected officials, but this was also done with dozens and hundreds of volunteers that came down at 4 a.m. and implemented this year after year and helped us with the maintenance of it. So huge community effort. So at that point, I remember having a conversation with Gwen on the first day of Better NATO, where we're sitting down in the fountain and your professor, Drusilla von Hengel, who is a key part of this project pathway. Drew has been an amazing partner. And I also want to thank Nick Falbo and Mike Rose and Derek Abe and Kirk, many people that have been, many professors that have helped create this pathway. But Drew von Hengel came up to Gwen and said, "What is this? What's going on?" Drew had taught the bike ped planning class. And Gwen, I believe, said, "Oh, well, this is my civil capstone engineering project. The stuff I learned in the bike ped planning class, I've now applied to my civil engineering work." And I remember being a bit confounded by that conversation of asking Gwen, "Well, how does this usually work? Do engineering students not take bike ped planning classes? Do engineering students not take urban planning classes?" And I didn't realize that urban planners and civil engineering is typically separate fields and continues in that way in the professional context as well. Gwen had done something unique of taking this bike ped urban planning class and taking the lab as well, leading into her civil engineering work. And so that we essentially transformed what Gwen had, the curriculum that Gwen had taken, into the project pathway. Again, this is a lot of little words, just trying to show you the concept here. We now have a process where TREC at PSU asks for requests for proposals from community members for different project ideas. Take that to the bike ped planning class, then into this design studio, and then the civil engineering capstone project. Here's Gwen speaking about, it says, "Why don't we make this a thing? It's such a good idea. We get to do real work, do real stuff." So with the help of TREC at PSU and some of their interns, we've created this RFP that is both a request for proposals, but also a resource to communities. Nathan here is our coordinator and has been doing a great job of soliciting new projects. We're incredibly grateful. So after Better NATO and the creation of this pathway, we started soliciting more projects, and more projects came. The projects like Better Broadway, Connect the Park Blocks. Oh, you can see it keeps going on. Willamette, Ankeny, St. John's, Southwest Corridor, Grand MLK, Living Coley. This is just a few years of student projects. Better Broadway was a huge project. That was a mile segment, approximately 7th Avenue to 21st on Broadway. Oof, it was a lot of work. We put about a year of building relationships with the neighbors and the businesses. And it was a lot of work. You see here we've got volunteers placing traffic control cones. We had AARP provide a $10,000 donation that we were incredibly appreciative of their support. They wanted to find ways for people to age in place and be able to have connectivity across Broadway. Found out that businesses on the south side of Broadway had less retail sales than the ones on the north side because of that barrier to pedestrian crossings. We tried an element. The same thing as on 3rd Avenue. We had some of the business owners on Broadway say, why can't we just have crosswalks? And the city said, well, it's a triple threat and you have very fast vehicles moving through there. Well, why can't you just do what you did downtown and put in crosswalks like you did on 3rd? Okay, well, that sounds like a great idea. Let's do that. Let's try that out. So we tested out the concept for a week. You can see, Glenn speaking with the press, we created the first transit island in the city. We worked with TriMet, went to TriMet. I remember having a meeting down at their office and saying, okay, so just theoretically, if we were to build a floating transit island, what would your requirements be? And they go, oh, okay, well, we're not approving anything, but if we were to do something, it would need to have ADA access and it would need to have railings this tall and the slope of the ramp couldn't be more than this. And okay, we took some notes and I think we could build that. So then we tested it out. We built it as a plywood deck. People thought it was great. That being said, within the first hour of us testing it out, the blind community showed up and said, oh, this doesn't meet our requirements. And we found that to be incredibly helpful. And we said, okay, well, how could we change this? They said, there's no tactile feedback. There's no truncated domes. There's no way to feel when we're at the edge of the platform. So, okay, well, how can we emulate what would be done? I said, well, what about yellow duct tape with rope underneath it, with 3 strands of rope, like you're at a subway, the edge of a subway platform? Yeah, I think we could try that. So, okay, great. So we tested that out. We also thickened the bars on our crosswalk again. So these projects were allowing for an iterative approach. By this point, we now have full student involvement. So the PSU students are the ones that are doing the planning work on this, the engineering work on this, and then also the ones that were volunteering, making this happen. So this project would not have happened in its entirety if it wasn't for the PSU student work. Now, these are headlines from in the last year or so. PBOT is getting federal grants to make essentially this project come to life. Now, there's a lot of folks at PBOT and elsewhere that are making this project happen. I don't want to say that this is Better Block's, that we made this happen, but I know that Better Block and the students, the PSU students that did this work, helped pave a pathway or help contribute to this coming to life. So excited to see this come to fruition and incredibly thankful to all the work of the students that helped push this idea along. So we also ended up helping with Oregon Walkways. This is one of our great partners, is Oregon Walks. We had an idea submitted to us about the Green Loop and the concept of connecting the park blocks from PSU to PNCA, connecting these 2 downtown institutions. From that idea also came about, well, the Green Loop, why don't we just focus on Central City? Why isn't there other loops around town? That's where the idea for Coli Camina came and the Lentz Founders Fair, of this idea of a series of loops around the city connected by neighborhood greenways that could be culturally specific. Our team created traffic control plans for these. The students studied these projects. And we had a hoot. We had a fun time hanging in the streets. And it was great to be able to help our partners like Oregon Walks. Here's an organization that does amazing work as a statewide pedestrian advocacy group, but may not have the resources to be able to pull off events like this with their partners as well. Here we go. We started working then on some bigger projects. We stepped back from actually implementing the projects ourselves after Better Broadway. And we started focusing on just studying the concepts and then sharing the concepts with the city and the wider audience. So all of these projects, I want to say, they were implemented by PBOT. They were implemented by TriMet. Credit goes where it's due. But for Madison Street, for example, here's the initial plan submitted by students. Here's what it looked like prior to implementation. This is looking from City Hall towards Hawthorne Bridge. The first bus lane in Portland. This project was provided to us by the Portland Bus Lane Project. We worked with them and the PSU students worked with them for over a year studying this concept and then meeting with the various officials. I remember one specific meeting where we brought all the engineers together and we brought all the agencies together. So we had, TriMet and the Police Bureau and the Mayor's Office and PBOT all in a room huddled around the student plans. And I found out that these agencies don't always talk and they don't always engage with each other. And so there ended up being some what I could only describe as like wheeling and dealing and amongst the agencies over this conceptual student plan. So one specific element of it was there's 2 parking stalls that the police bureau didn't want to give up on Madison. And that was going to prevent the entire bus lane from occurring. And they said, well, we can't give that up. We need those, and it's important for our response times. And it just became this huge stumbling block. And again, this project is just conceptual. But one of the representatives from the mayor's office said, well, actually, I think we have police powers that over Trump the police bureau. So actually, I think we could get rid of those 2 parking stalls. And you know, if you guys don't like it, well, the chief can talk to the mayor and see what they have to say. But let's give this a shot, you know, for this project. And then, oops, I'm going too fast. So then this conceptual project, a few months later, ends up getting implemented. PBOT builds it into Central City in Motion, creates a bike lane on a downhill slope. It's showing the concept of a shared lane with both buses and bikes, which was a new concept at the time. It had been done informally elsewhere, but it was one of the first formal markings of a bike lane that I'm aware of. Let's continue. We studied MLK and Grant. This was a project that was a little pie in the sky. You know, the idea of like, let's convert a lane on Highway 99, historical Highway 99, MLK and Grant, to be just for transit. And even more so, our pie in the sky idea was we got the Central East Side Industrial Council to propose the project. The CIC is a very traditional business organization, very focused on freight. And so we spoke to their needs and worked with PBOT to find out if there could be a designation for a bus freight lane. It's the only bus freight lane that we know in the nation. PBOT said, yeah, if you don't use the red marking the entire way, so you'll see the red markings kind of end right where the Central East Side industrial neighborhood starts. So if you're up further north, you'll see there's red markings up until about Burnside. And then after Burnside, you'll see bus freight okay. And we thought that was really important to find a way to work with the folks that are likely to be could be some of the biggest adversaries to the project and have them be the project endorsers. So again, this was a student concept. Students studied it, the traffic control plan, and I am so glad that we are not the ones that implemented it. That would have been dangerous and would have taken some emotional tolls on us. So very grateful for PBOT and TriMet and Portland Streetcar for bringing this project to life, and really proud of the students that spent a year of working on this that now has an impact on commutes. And it's also nice, our business has a location in the Central East Side. Some of the fellow business owners there, they're proud of this now too. They like how it's easier to cross the street to get to Sheridan's. It's easier to get to Miller Paint, that it reduced the vehicle lanes from that quadruple threat and it's making their neighborhood easier to get to their needs. More projects. This is another student project to study bus lanes and protected bike lanes on Burnside. Again, a lot of small font here, but I'm just trying to show this is what the students were producing that helped contribute to the conversations that were occurring. So here we've got implementation schedules, we've got, you know, possible array of materials and different ideas, concepts, and then partnerships. You know, everything from the Business Alliance to private developers, to the county, to TriMet. Who are the folks that we should go out and speak to? And that student work is incredibly helpful to us as activists and to the civic agencies as well, to have a list of who should we engage with, who should we talk to. 3 months later, 4 months later, again, this gets implemented. Now, again, I want to say this is not Better Block that's implementing this project. This was PBOT, this was TriMet, this is Multnomah County that made this project happen. But, you know, what was once a wild idea of converting an entire lane on the Burnside Bridge to a bus lane and putting in protected bike lanes is now being implemented, and was implemented in quite rapid fashion. So, you know, and then this continues to expand. You know, the students had studied the concept of what would it look like to have that bus lane continue up to 12th Avenue on the east side? Now, if you look at it, Central City in Motion included that project, and there's now a bus lane that extends, essentially from Old Town to 12th on the east side. I might jump back. I also want to say thanks to the Street Trust and Bike Loud and Multnomah County. Those partnerships were really essential to moving that project forward. So here's more student work. Here's one of the original proposals. This is going to be Burnside and Broadway here, with Ankeny Alley. What I got Burnside up here, Ankeny Alley. So there was a concept to have a protected bike lane on Northwest Broadway from Burnside to the bridge. Why is Broadway the busiest bridge in the morning per bridge counts for incoming traffic, but one of the least busy on the outgoing traffic? Could it be that there's no dedicated route to get to the bridge? So we worked with the Old Town Community Association, students studied the concept, and then Central City in Motion, a PBOT program, that federal grant that we've been told wait 6 years for in Old Town. Now it's getting implemented, and it's getting implemented with the student ideas. Students also say Willamette Boulevard. These are some headlines from even just, a couple weeks ago. Again, this is a PBOT project. This is one that the staff at PBOT are implementing, but that the students studied and many community members have engaged with over the years. The students on this one did a concept of what would a continuous bike lane look like from North Portland to St. John's on Willamette Boulevard. They reached out to University of Portland. They reached out to other stakeholders, neighborhood groups, really help build a foundation for this project to be implemented. Again, credit goes to PBOT for striping this and making this happen, and taking the political risk, but the student work is incredibly appreciated for conveying the concept and getting the idea moved forward. Rose Lane project is another great project that PBOT did after some of the Better Block bus lanes. You can see here on Hawthorne, they are now implementing their own floating bus islands. Great, good idea, guys. That's awesome. Very ambitious proposal. And it's been great to see them build upon the success of the MLK Grand and Madison Street bus lanes, Everett Street, some of the other student projects. This is Central City in Motion that I keep mentioning. This is that grant that we were told by the lead traffic engineer to apply for. And we, with student work, were able to encourage PBOT to move from an initial proposal of a very sparse network to their ultimate proposal of a much denser network. And we were able to take both student concepts and student projects. We were also able to take some of the work we've done with the business community to say, look, you're in a negotiation here. Let's not put on the table what you're willing to settle for. Let's put on the table what you want. And then let's discuss, where we go from there. Ultimately, this is what City Council approved. So it was great to have the student work kind of pave the way on that. One of our more recent projects is one near and dear to my heart, Steelbridge Skate Park. This is a project the students studied as far as an access plan to the Steelbridge Skate Park site. This is a project that had been waiting for 20 years and it kind of languished on, and it's part of the skate park master plan. We did a Pedapalooza ride where we did a fake groundbreaking. We wheelbarrowed concrete down Beternado. We did kind of a ribbon cutting, a ceremonial first shovel and a first pour. Got Queer Skate PDX, Skate Like a Girl, Community and Bowls, all these great organizations showed up to thank the city council for their leadership. We get a call from the mayor's office and city council the next day saying, "You're thanking us for what?" We're like, "We're thanking you for your leadership." And they're like, "Leadership?" We're like, "Yeah, all the leadership you're gonna show and like all the leadership you've shown." And they said, "Great, well, would you come to council and thank us in person?" And we go, "We'd love to. Sure, we'll thank." And they say we don't get thanked often in person. So we showed up and thanked them in person. Got 250,000 allocated from Prosper. Got a lot of great feedback, people here testifying in front of council. And then we did it again and got 15 million. So here's a student project that's had immediate results, very quick succession. The RFP was just released and a bidder, I believe, is going to be selected here in the next week or so. So this will be a hopefully transformational project for Old Town. Will be a public plaza space. It's not just for skaters, but for people to be able to cross from Waterfront Park into Old Town. And here's where Trek, and big thanks to Nathan and Jennifer for helping facilitate this program and for Trek's involvement. For many years, it was us as volunteers trying to push this through and coordinate with the different professors. Having Trek's involvement has been hugely important to legitimizing this process and coordinating and helping the student work and helping let student knowledge serve the city. We have 2 current projects right now. One is the International School of Portland. We're working with them. Look, you can see they're located right here amongst just a cluster of, as a victim of past urban planning. And they have students from preschool on up to middle school and their parents trying to figure out how to get to and from that site. So students are currently working on that. Doing something here. And then we also have Bridges Burnside. And that's one that you'll be hearing more about here in the near future. But it's looking at how we can seize on the opportunity of the bridge closure for the 5 to 7 year period and activate Old Town and try to find ways to make Burnside less of a barrier to pedestrians, foot traffic, and have it be more of an opportunity for to connect downtown, Old Town, Pearl District. So you'll be hearing more about that. But with that, I just want to say thank you and thanks to all the volunteers and everyone that's been part of this.
Thanks so much, Ryan. For those viewing the webinar, please feel free to submit your questions using the Q&A feature in the control panel at the bottom of your Zoom window. Those in the room can simply raise their hands if anyone has a question in the room. Not all at once.
If you had to give some advice to another city that's like, ooh, this is cool. What advice would you give to sort of emulating or replicating what's happened here?
I mean, it's really that strong partnership with the university and with the Bureau of Transportation that's made this possible. So us having staff at the Bureau of Transportation that has great ideas, and many staff that have gone through the PSU program. They're familiar with what are the MERC program and what are the TREC programs. So to have that PBOT staff be familiar with the program and the study work, and then also to have the university be behind the projects and supporting it has been the main way to get things done, and the main advice I would give is to have those strong partnerships amongst the university and the Bureau of Transportation.
I'll tag on. Were there any mistakes along the way that you learned from?
Oh my goodness.
Just one example.
I mean, having those strong partnerships, finding ways to work with folks to identify concerns off the get-go, to identify people that might be oppositional to these projects from the get-go, ways to bring them in and have that buy-in, and to not look at adversarial ideas as challenging, but more as opportunities for adjustment and for consideration. One of the great things about working here is both within the university and within the city, there is some amazing individuals that have great ideas, but due to the bureaucratic framework are not always able to test out the concepts and ideas that they may have. And so one of the things that I think is not a mistake, it's a benefit of the project, is that we've been able to breathe oxygen into those spaces and allow some creativity to occur where otherwise it may not have. So.
Quick question. Has there been any collaboration with Better Block PDX with similar groups in other US cities to accomplish this elsewhere?
Yeah, we've had requests and feedback, and so we've worked with the Better Block National Group. We've worked with groups in Bellingham and the Pacific Northwest. I just was in Kingston, Ontario, and Toronto and Winnipeg, sharing some of this work that we've done. So there's been a lot of interest, but as far as our volunteer organization goes, it's just been mostly resource sharing.
Sure.
Yeah.
I hear you talk a lot about some successes, a lot of stuff that Better Block has been involved with. I can think of a number of projects that maybe after hearing all these success stories, I would have liked to have had Better Block involved with. And I hear you talk a lot about like, business partnerships and those sorts of things. I'm thinking of, there wasn't a better, Northeast 33rd Avenue, but there's also not a lot of businesses along that corridor. And I'm wondering, what have you learned in your interactions with, fairly tight-knit communities, neighborhoods, those sorts of things that you'd be able to leverage when you're dealing with neighborhoods where maybe you're dealing with some just individual residents that don't have, say, a lot of business, community, those sorts of smaller scale or more downtown, denser places. How do you get these projects further out into neighborhoods where they're going to directly benefit the whole city? Not just letting them get stopped by, a single homeowner who wants to park their car, those kind of issues.
Yeah, I mean, I want to speak to kind of the underlying issue there of equity, and that, we've really stepped back on project planning and tried to institutionalize how we request projects. And so that's why we've transitioned to working with TREC and PSU to do the request for proposals. That's why we worked with the mayor's administration and the city council and PBOT to create the Livable Streets program, because we felt that it was unequitable for us as, privileged, planners to say, oh, this project and this project and this project, and this is where we should do projects. So our concept was to try to expand what is genuinely a good idea, but to expand it in a more democratic fashion. And the city is the best instrument that we have to democratize this work. And so at every turn, we were trying to lessen the importance of us as individuals and trying to institutionalize this. For a project like Northeast 33rd, I would also take a little umbrage with that characterization about a single homeowner, and that those are homeowners that, those are African-American homeowners that have been there for generations in what is traditionally a red line neighborhood. So I would say that their voice and their concerns about parking and about bike lanes and around, I would give outsized authority to. And I don't know that that would be a project that Better Block would probably not have anything to do with. If we were to have anything to do with it, it would be a project where convening groups to listen to the community and hear what the community would want to see. And the result from those conversations could be the status quo. It could be a bike lane. It could be something entirely different. But I don't know what the result of those conversations would be. That's one of the beauty of the student work, is that we're going into these concepts like with Bridgeless Burnside right now. We don't know what the students are going to propose. We don't know what the community members are going to propose. We don't know what is going to be collected. But I think there is a benefit to that process. So
I just want to kind of add to that. I think one thing that was highlighted by your presentation is just how much in community building and just communications and convening and all those ideas. And I think a key part of why Better Block, why we work with business districts primarily, or kind of latched onto the businesses, is the funding element. And so I think that in terms of a Northeast 33rd or a more residential context, that's where it comes down to the city or whatever organization. It takes time and therefore money to build those relationships, have those conversations, as an ongoing thing and not just project specific. And so I think that that's like better what we're doing it on a project specific, but as you can see, it's a long term, and a lot of discussion, a lot of talking, and we're partnering with businesses because right now that's how we make it some financial support. But even that, I think it's just the lesson really is talking and listening and learning together, and that just takes time and effort. And so on a broader, more, multi land use type of application, it's just time, and listening and learning.
Yeah, listening and learning.
Are there online questions?
Yes, do you have a follow-up?
Oh, just, this can be a larger conversation because we're not gonna solve this in a few minutes, but just, I think getting at kind of the question, the answer, I guess my concern with a lot of this is when you bring up businesses, what I'm trying to ask is, how do you engage with the folks that are maybe not represented by, money business interests? Because I see a lot of this attention being focused on, downtown and the central city, which positively affect a lot of people. But I'm just imagining, it's like, I would love for this to be the single most walkable, bikeable place in the entire Pacific Northwest, if not the world. But if it's just PSU, just Better Block, and just the city workers who are often working downtown, it's just kind of getting at that question. Like you're saying, how do you democratize that, get that out to the neighborhoods and engage folks?
And that's why we're trying to work with the mayor's office in the city to have the Livable Streets program. That's where we work with Oregon Walks with Koli Kamina, Lentz Green Ring. I mean, that concept was for us to get out of the central city. And I would love to work even more with the neighborhood business associations. Venture Portland has been a great ally to us. The Midway and Centennial and Lentz and Koli business associations have been helpful as well.
I think also just you have to have like this process that we have created can and should be built into the city processes for their projects as they do this type of stuff. Kind of learn try it before you buy it and implement that as a city so that you're not relying on individuals and individual communities, and it's just part of the democratized process.
I want to make sure we get some of the online questions.
Great.
Been waiting.
Couple of them, there's a few of them. So the first one is, are there any greater push for bike freight transportation so that large vehicles will be less needed in urban setting?
That's a whole nother Friday forum. Yes, there is a push for new freight mobility with micromobility and tricycles, and I could do an entire session on that. Yes. December 6th or something.
I suspect. Another one is about the concept you're talking about. How do those apply to suburbs in our area, such as Puck Rose, East Portland, Gratian, Rockwood, Caldwell, and so on?
Yeah, that is a great question. I mean, really, it comes down to that question, democratizing this process and being able to have both PBOT, implement livable streets and have projects in those neighborhoods, but also in the suburban jurisdictions as well, seeing the benefit of projects like this. We have done work in Independence, Oregon, where we help them come up with a neighborhood greenway network. So the RFP and the Better Block project submissions are not limited to the central city. And I would really encourage anyone out there with concepts, with ideas, to get ready for the RFP and to share their ideas with us for future projects.
I think there is one more, but it's specific to the Burnside Bridge plan. So I'm not familiar with the term mentioned here, but we'll see. Will there be any change to the Burnside Bridge plan to connect it to the Esplenda, since maps initially prevented that? I'm not sure what the maps.
There's current conversation going on about that right now, that both the Central East Side Industrial Council, Human Access Project, and others are working to discuss they found some additional funding. There might be a funicular, who knows? Okay, don't quote me on that one. Other questions?
One more comment sort of on this sort of equity topic.
Yes.
At the beginning of the Better Block process, there was a lot of discussion about how tactical urbanism was done in other locations and had been sort of very much in the zeitgeist at the time. And there was this question of where do you land on the sanctioned to unsanctioned spectrum? Because a lot of tactical urbanism was just sort of fly by night, like you would go and install some traffic cone somewhere. And the next day it was a mystery how it could have possibly happened and whatever, and the discussion starts there. It was very intentional, I think, that Better Block took a path of sort of trying to engage in a sanctioned version of tactical urbanism so that people could participate in it without having a fear of sort of legal repercussions or other sorts of items that, really might not make it as accessible to folks who don't have a certain privilege to take a parking space all day just on your own and be confident that you're not gonna get arrested because of it, or, set up a bike lane in the middle of the street and be confident that, if some tragedy does happen, you're within the sort of, realm of the permitted. And so, I think that was an intentional choice early on that really led to the ability to coordinate so well with the city and with PSU and with these other sort of institutions and community groups that might have been turned off by a sort of unsanctioned tactical urbanism approach.
One more thing, just because I think for the sake of, earlier questions about, advice to other cities and other cities that have asked us questions, I think we'd be remiss to mention that a key part, Ryan mentioned the liability and insurance thing. We get that through Umbrella, which is a group here that is a 501c3. We got some board members in the room, and that is how we're able to get that liability insurance, take in donations in a tax-free way. And so things like that is a really key part. And that I think is a missing element that does not exist in other cities that makes it more challenging to build these relationships. Because you can come in and facilitate all these conversations, but being able to say, oh, and I have the liability insurance is absolutely fundamental from a city and other broader stakeholder perspectives. I don't think a lot of the stuff that Better Block has done here would have been possible without Umbrella existing. And so I think that whatever form that looks like in other cities is a key fundamental piece of it.
Yeah, fiscal sponsorship from Umbrella was a huge thing. If you're in other jurisdiction, look for a fiscal sponsor.
Yeah.
That was a huge element for us, for our success.
All right,
Great.
awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you all for attending today's seminar, both in person and online. For those of you joining remotely, after the seminar ends, you'll have an opportunity to complete a brief survey about today's event. It only takes a few minutes and we would really appreciate your feedback, so please complete that survey for us. Once again, thank you, Ryan, for speaking today, and thank all of you for joining us.